Doctor, shall we begin?
Sure.
Good afternoon to one and all. Taking our afternoon further, and to begin with the day 4, second session of Faculty Development Program on Integrating Yoga in Higher Education on the occasion of International Day of Yoga 2022, organized by Meenakshi Academy of Higher Education and Research, Chennai. On this occasion, we heartily welcome our chief guest, Dr. Michael Karasovich from American Institute of Architects. After graduating with a diploma architectural technology from the British Columbia Institute of Technology in Vancouver and working on many projects, he took up his professional architectural education at University of Oregon and then Columbia University's GSAPP. He has worked in Vancouver, Los Angeles, Vienna, Hamburg, Venice, and he worked in the architectural community of Vienna for some time, including Hans Hollein, Huck Himmelbaum, Rudiger Lehner, and others. Returning to New York City to work for Ralph Applebaum Associates Designing Museum. Mr. Michael is licensed to practice architecture in New York State as well as in India. He is the member of the AIA, the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, ISO CAR, and the Architectural, Cultural and Spirituality Forum. He has practiced Raja Yoga beginning under Pujya Sri Parthasarthi Raga Gopalachari Maharaj from 1994. That experience caused a divide between the work and the knowledge that comes with such practice. About 15 years ago, he left practice to take up research towards a path uniting the intentions of spirituality and life in the world, which includes professional practice. He completed his doctorate, the goal in architecture, research at the Academy of Fine Arts, Vienna, on the basis of work previously begun at the SMSF facility at Bengaluru. Since completing his doctorate, he has been teaching in India and continuing his research on new grounds for meaning and importance of practicing architecture to evolve beyond today's form of profession through the unity of architecture and spirituality as practices, focusing on Raja Yoga and its antecedent Vedic roots along with Vastu. May I now request Sir to deliver a speech on environmental consciousness. We welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I think first of all, I'll try to share my PPT and hopefully that works today. 1 second. Should have had that ready. Okay. Share screen. Okay. There's the screen. I hope that's showing up. And the
we can see the screen, sir.
And now you've got full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to kind of tell a story here. We're talking about the environment, and I'm going to be referring a lot to architecture and also to the word aspiration, which is a kind of a code that I use to get everything across. And I think hopefully by the end of this, everything will kind of come together so you understand the initial question of what the relationship is of, say, most directly yoga to the environment. So as you heard from the introduction, I'm an architect. I'm not a scholar of yoga. I've only been practicing, which some people would say that's the real scholarship, of course. And the other aspect is that I rely on experts for all of this knowledge that comes from Sanskrit. You know, people like Dr. Balasubramanian, and Sampadnanda Mishra, Dr. Sampadnanda Mishra, who are two people who I've interacted with, and all of the commentaries that have been done. So I wanted to say that, because I'm not strictly speaking a scholar of these things. I have people in the West who say, "What, you can get a degree in yoga?" Like, it's not even a concept to some people from where I come from. So that's where I would like to start. And of course, the other thing which was already mentioned is that there's a real turning point after 30 years of practice and building. I've built 20 buildings myself with my hands. That there's a sort of need for meaning. So some of the things I'm going to cover here, which is, it might look complicated, maybe it is, but hopefully it becomes clear that there's practice, experience, and experiment, how Raj Yoga or yoga is related to practice, the knowledge we need needs to be retrieved, how yoga may enliven contemporary architectural practice. Raj Yoga can illuminate a superordinate program of architectural practice. And by that, I mean that if we think about architecture, we think of things like houses and libraries and pavilions, temples, but architecture itself has a program. And that's what I'll mostly be referring to, that architecture itself has a program and provides something. And then the revealing of that truth. All right, so what is architecture and what is environment? That's what I'm going to be covering for this first little section. When I talk about architects, I consider everyone to be an architect, because architecture is not a building or and it's not just any building, first of all, and it's certainly not the building. Architecture is the experience we have when we're at such a place. So the architect is creating a place which has some environmental effect on us when we go into that space, and something that we call architecture happens. So I'm going from the point of view that every human being is an architect, because we make the architecture in our own experience, in our own consciousness, in our awareness. We don't make the architecture when we make a building. And the practicing architect is the one who has chosen to provide that experience. Obviously, I've right here, when I say that, I've divided myself off from the vast majority of architects, right? They'll be starting to fumble and say, well, I don't know what you're talking about here. And so it becomes, I'm hoping that the people who are knowledgeable about yoga will see the necessity of this turn. So architects are all of us. And that is why we all know about architecture. And there would be no architecture if we didn't all know about architecture. The second thing is that architecture and spirituality are siblings. They're actually twins. Because when a human being becomes conscious, some mythical moment, some long time ago, it could also be elephants that became conscious, but they're different from humans. Humans have a different role. But when the human being becomes conscious, he says, well, I am, this, what am I? How am I? What do I do? My brain is going haywire. I have to control. I have to find something that organizes me, which is what the program of yoga is, especially Raja Yoga. And I understand Raja Yoga is something that is basically coined only 150 years ago, say by Vivekananda, who wrote the book called Raja Yoga, and that it is essentially a newer packaging or awareness of yoga, which focuses on the last three of the Ashtanga. So I'm using it that way. So when the person becomes conscious inside themselves and starts to understand what they are intending to be, they also at the same time become capable, at the very same time, they become capable of saying, where am I? Why am I here? Shouldn't I be over there? Should we go over there? Is it better to be there? And when we're there, what are we going to do about it? Is it okay? No, I need something that is not just covering me from the rain, but I need something which makes me feel like I am who I am. It actually helps me to connect to my ancestors and helps me to feel toward my future. There's no real difference between understanding the inside of oneself and the outside of oneself. They must come at the same time. So along with that is a kind of a silent partner, which is the word, I use the word aspiration. And I'm sure that many of you, especially people who are conversant in Sanskrit, will be able to understand the kind of resonance that that has within the idea of dwelling. So when I'm dwelling with aspiration within myself, we call it spirituality. And when I'm dwelling with aspiration toward the outside world, I call it, I'm saying that that is what our architecture is. So we can say that they're twins, and in some sense they're equals, but they're not, because the inward growth and the inward awareness always supersedes, because we are, you know, that's a whole other discussion. Let's leave that alone. But I use the sentence here: dwelling life supports and serves that life that extends beyond dwelling, dwelling being here. So by doing this, I've separated myself from the Western idea. This drawing is one that's given almost every undergraduate student in the Western world, which was produced a couple hundred years ago by Lauger, Marc-Antoine Lauger, where he talks about the primitive hut as being the origin of architecture. And what we learn about is that it's made of sticks. Well, in this case, living trees and sticks, right? On the left hand, you can see that little house-like shape made of trees and sticks. But as we have gone through the 20th century, architecture has become sticks and mud. It's based in the primitive hut. This drawing is called the primitive hut. It's based in the primitive hut. And what I'm saying is that architecture is not based in the primitive hut. Architecture is based in consciousness. Architecture is based in consciousness that automatically has aspiration. And that hut can be made in many different ways. And as you can see in the drawing, actually nature is absolutely not excluded from that hut. But that's not talked about very much. I'm going to talk about it, and we're talking about it because we're talking about environment, which automatically relates to nature as well, right? So we're kind of diverging or reinterpreting this drawing. I mean, at first I was saying, I'll show you guys this drawing because this is what we're not doing. But when I went back into the drawing, I realized it's actually an interpretation of the drawing that we've been given as modern architects. So architecture is a form of aspiration. We are reminded of our life's purpose, not the purpose, but the impulse. We're actually reminded of the impulse that is deeper, that's deeper than the reason to stay alive. So we all say that the impulse to live is very strong enough in us. It's an innate thing. You stay alive no matter what. You try to stay alive. Well, there's another deeper version of that impulse, which is no longer about staying alive. It's about something else which transcends. And architecture touches on that, although it's housed in the need to stay alive. And this is not so much of a goal as it is a marg. It is a path. It's a way to go. So when you look at that, you start to see that there's a subtle relationship between our consciousness and the way we arrange matter and space. That is what the approach that I'm taking to this discussion about the environment and yoga. There's a relationship between our consciousness and the way we arrange matter and space. Using our cultural space, it's always specific to a culture because that's part of who we are, it's part of our tools. And it allows us to find the truth in light of the original inward and outward questioning that we may have. So I'm bringing in another word of inward and outward, inward being the spiritual, outward being the architectural. And this is innate in us. Architecture is innate in us. Like if we look at the pyramids, or if we look at an ancient building, or even the scraps of a building, the megalithic structures that you might have in Malta and all over the southeast of Asia, there's so many scraps of tremendous construction. We have in ourselves an initial feeling of something special that is connecting through time and across cultures because it's human. It's not cultural. Architecture is something which transcends that kind of relationship. So I would say that architecture is a peak or a certain attainment level of answering to an original outward questioning, just like spirituality and yoga is toward an inner questioning. So that locates architecture for us. Okay, I've already got that. So that questioning toward the outside can never not include the questioning of consciousness aspiring or spirituality. Consciousness aspiring is another way of putting spirituality for me. So if you look at all of that, what I've just explained, that is not what we're taught as architects. That is not what what most of us think of as architecture. Most of us think of architecture as buildings, and architects regularly talk about the architecture when they're actually talking about just a building, and they're not actually discussing architecture. And so most of the environment that we have is not architecture at all. Or actually, it's more complicated than that, and I'll be getting into that. The essentially lost knowledge today, or the expression of lost knowledge is what we're talking about. The problem we have is that architecture is buried under what we believe. Now, I'm kind of paralleling what we talk about in yoga, and I'll get to that. But architecture is buried in the idea of the technological need to build. Architecture traditionally uses the things we need to build, the spaces we need to live, but it's turned around in these machine ages, starting, in the 1800s in earnest, although it began a long time before. You could say it began with the Greeks 2,500 years ago. But what we have now is a life where architecture is buried in the mechanics of building. And for the profession of architecture, it's technology. There's a very big confusion in education as to whether you're teaching technology or architecture, or whether the need to teach technicalities or the need to teach architecture is more important. And I'll tell you, technology is winning. It's won this race right now. It's won this race, but it's going to lose, like the rabbit and the hare, right? It's going to lose. But right now, technology is burying the idea of architecture. So when we have this concealment of something which is innate in us, just as in spirituality, the heart is never gone. The soul is never gone. It's always bubbling. And in fact, it's always powering even the demise of the being that has been incarnated around it. It's still working. It's still there. And okay, architecture is concealed. So where I've come now is, these are famous architects that we have in the West. I just pulled out 3 men. Most of them were men until reasonably, the ones that are really published and really well known. And of course, we have people in India. Achyut Kanvinde is generally known as the first modern professional in India. And we have Anand Raje, who here is seen in Louis Kahn's office, working on the business and management school. And Charles Correa, who most of you have probably heard of. And then there's another one you've probably heard of, is B.V. Doshi. And I wanted to relate something about B.V. Doshi. I recently saw an interview where he was talking about having gone to the Meenakshi temple in Madurai and observing the people, walking around the place, seeing the people come in, seeing the people wander. And he said he had an epiphany, a brainstorm or something, where he suddenly realized that architecture can change your thinking. So if you think about thinking right, thinking correctly, right thinking, right understanding, and living honestly, suddenly he realized that architecture had the facility or had the effect on people that it would change their thinking, because he saw how they changed as they walked inside the temple, how they physically changed, how their Ausstrahlung, how their radiation worked, how their being became transformed. Now you have to realize, he came to that realization when he was 50, after he had finished Chandigarh, after he had finished so many buildings, after he had built the built the architecture school at Ahmedabad, which is now called SEPT. He had done all of these projects. He had done so much architecture. He was an established, well-known architect. And at 50, it dawned on him that this was actually what architecture could do. So this is, to me, really, really amazing. I mean, of course, he's been living another 50 years because he's almost twice as old now, so we're very lucky that he's been able to live that long and live out that knowledge that he's had, along with the power that he has to get things done. So in my work, this whole genre of architecture, which is 99% of the architecture we're getting, so-called architecture sometimes, is not what we're talking about today. And we can move on to talking about what architecture versus the environment is. So there's a relationship between what human nature is, which is directly related to nature, because nature, in fact, put us here. Nature arranged that our consciousness exists in it. So we're not actually in any way separate from nature. I'm probably speaking obvious things to all of you, but then at the same time, there's humanity and nature, because we can act in nature. That's the relationship of consciousness. And that is where the question of environment comes up. Actually, the question of environment would never come up if we weren't conscious beings, because we wouldn't know the difference between the world and ourselves. It would all be one thing. So nature facilitates consciousness as us. This is the context for yoga. This is how yoga connects to the environment. So I'm not even using the word environment here, but that is how we come to the environment. Like to give some examples here. There in the United States, there was a woman named Maher Small, or Maher Small Wright. She separated from her partner, so I'm not sure exactly how her name is now, but at the time of this beginning, and she was a person who spontaneously had a relationship with the nature spirits, or the devas, as she herself calls them, where she developed a garden. And this is a picture of the garden at this time, not 20 years ago. In this garden, she was able to get instructions from the spirits of cabbage and carrots and beans and everything else, and was developing her sensitivity was innate. She had it from the beginning, but she was developing her relationship with nature to understand how it works, such as, for example, she had a row of cabbages which were being eaten by the beetles. And so she made an arrangement that with the cabbage and the beetles, that the beetles could feast on one cabbage at the end of the row, but the rest of the row, they would leave it alone. And she was able to achieve that kind of negotiation. And so she's been teaching people for 30 years. She's still living, but now she's quite old. And so she's got apprentice upon apprentice upon apprentice who has gone through and worked in this garden. And, in my mind, I had an image of this garden, and she describes it in words in this book here. It's called Behaving as If the God in All Life Mattered. It's a life story book, but it's the core book of what she's doing. And so I really didn't expect the garden to look the way it does. And maybe it didn't look that way 30 years ago. But as far as it goes, this is what it looks like. And I think it's always good to see something like this. So here it is in spring. In that area, you get snow and ice in winter. So the garden shuts down in winter, which is part of the cycle. And at the center of the garden, she has a certain object which helps nature to organize around the idea of a garden. And she actually says that a car is a garden, as a Maruti Suzuki is a garden. Everything that human beings make is technically a garden, because we're harnessing the energy of the world, not things, but energy, And the energy, all energy has life. All of this has life in different forms. So this is one image of a connection with nature or with the environment. Includes very, very directly nature and the human impulse to do something. And the next one I would like to do is just to bring in the story of the Miyawaki forest, reforestation or forests, which you may have heard of. It's a very intensive program to take dead areas, and it's a certain way to plant that immediately allows the ground to build back its soil and to maintain its moisture, and it grows like mad. You know, you basically can regreen an area that is completely dead within 6 months. And this fellow has been producing this all over India. Wherever somebody comes in, he plants this kind of system of undergrowth and overgrowth to create greening so that nature can come back and live. So in a place like this, the nature is all around. And in fact, Maher also creates a certain corner where the nature can just be on its own, and people are not supposed to go there. People are excluded from that corner. This is where nature can retreat and be in its own form, subtly and also physically. It's just a jumble of plants that grow there, and these things can retreat there, both in spirit and physically growing whatever happens to grow. So here you got a similar thing. You try to create a jumble. But the reason I'm showing this is because this is how you make it. And to me, that's a bit shocking, right? It's pure allopathy. It is not harmonized with nature whatsoever. You are making a massive intervention in the grounds to create a new base for these plants to grow. And over time, of course, it will, you know, if we don't build walls and don't build trenches and pave things, of course, that forest would spread and grow bigger, and it would eventually have 100-foot tall teak trees if you left it alone, right? It would grow. But what's interesting to me is that this is not a picture of harmony with the environment. This is a devastation. This is a complete tearing. And so, yes, you can achieve. Then you plant the plants, which above is the way it looks at the beginning. And then 6 months later, it looks like this, right? So you have the growth coming in. But I just wanted to put to you this image, two images of communicating and harmonizing with the environment. And I think that they're really, really important. In a certain way, they're opposites that harmonize with the need in the case of Mayawaka. But in the first case, it's a real communication. I don't think that the latter method requires any kind of communication with the environment whatsoever, any kind of harmonization with the environment. It's still a very human idea of what has to happen. And of course, it's not wrong. You know, creating a bed for plants to flourish is perfectly right. I'm not talking about it being right or wrong. I'm just talking about there's these two kind of mental positions where the second one is a real machine ages approach. And it does take the force of hundreds of horses, like that machine there is driven by a 100 horsepower motor. So it takes hundreds of horses to produce something like this. Then I'd like to give a third example, which, it's one of my go-to books, has been the Manasara as translated or interpreted. And I have a big story about that, but I'm not going to go into it. Interpreted by P.K. Acharya in the late 20s and 30s, a real dedicated lifetime project that he did. And I'd like to focus on the chapter 3, where you have site preparation, and the title is Asking for Permission. And so, as some of you may know, I'm not saying that I'm the last expert on this. I'm just basically reading this and interpreting for certain purposes, which architects do. That's what architects actually, we're not scholars in the sense of like saying what's perfectly, I'm telling you exactly what's there. Architects say, I'm telling you what I want to tell you, because my job is to make an edifice of the things that need to become physical, and words also are physical. So the way we come to a site, say a building site, you know how it works in our world. You've seen it many times. Maybe some of your families have built houses, you do puja and so on. So some of you are familiar with all of that. What I wanted to talk about is that there's these stages that they've written out in the Manasara, which has to do with beginning at the very beginning with a prayer that is, I mean, I can say the exact way that P.K. Acharya translated it is, let all creatures, demons and gods as well, leave this place. Let them go elsewhere and make their abode there. So we start out with something which on the surface seems like, what? You're just telling everything that lives there to go away? And at first glance, you might say, oh, well, that's not harmonizing with nature. But it is, because he's asking. Right there, you have one of the biggest breaks with our culture as we have it today, is that he's asking. That the architect is asking. And the architect speaks for the owner. The architect, the owner, the family, they are asking. And asking probably makes nature begin to weep. You know, in these days, you ask nature, seriously ask nature. So that's one step. And then they bring in their own nature. They bring in the cattle, the oxen, and they bring in the grass. They plant the wheat or the other grasses. They make it into a farm. And the important thing, they even mention that after the cattle and the oxen have been there, then there is clear, clean water, and it smells like cattle. And the land has to smell like that to be prepared to build a building, to build architecture, to create architecture, or to, because the Manasara says, if you don't create architecture, you are playing dice with death and loss. You have to create architecture, otherwise you're taking a big risk. You don't want to take that risk. Then there's a testing of the ground, which is done just by digging a pit and putting in water and seeing what happens to the water. The water drains away. If some of it drains away, if it turns to mud, if it stays clear, so many different things that can be found out. And after this is done and the assessment of the ground is there, then you plow the land. The architect himself wears certain clothes, and the ox is dressed in a certain way, and the plow is made in a certain way, i.e. perfectly. The plow is a perfect plow. And you plow the land. The architect himself goes out and plows the land, and then somebody goes and finishes the land. It's completely plowed. And these are all necessary before you actually build a building. So there is a communication with the environment in that. And I'm using this because the Manasara comes from the same base as yoga. They come from the same source, from the same ideology, from the same, and in some cases, the Manasara has been, documented as having pieces of other texts brought into it. So in this structure that I'm giving, I can break it up into 3 levels. The first one is permission. Our permission to do something in the world. Well, we have it, right? We have the permission to do whatever we want in the world. It's implicit. We have the permission. We're free to do anything we want in the world. Free to do it. The next thing is asking. We ask the entity. We identify the world and its parts, its components as an entity. And this is something that we express. This is the express world that we live in. This is our ability. This is where we work. And then beyond that, with the communication, we have unity, which is implied. Consciousness implies unity. Consciousness implies that we can consolidate all of those entities and our needs in what we do. So the question is, what do we actually commune with when we're in harmony with nature? So if you look at this picture here of this thing going on here, I've seen so many of these, having worked on so many projects in my life, and it starts to seem like a really gross transgression to begin to dig around in the earth like this. It's not so much that the digging is the problem, it's the sense in which it's done. It's the orientation toward that. It's a simple idea that I have the power, therefore I will. And it's sure we have the permission, but the asking of the entity, and what is that entity? If you're going to create a Miyawaka forest, what is that entity that you're working with? Or how many entities are there that you're working with? Or how do those entities fold and layer into each other? There's so much to say about that, but I think you get the idea of what I'm pointing to here. So there's a lot of things which, when that tractor is digging and when the concrete is being poured, that are being concealed, that are literally being buried in like our cities bury the world. Our cities bury the world in a certain sense. And our urbanism, which spreads across the landscape and touches every corner of the world now, is framing the world. It's structuring the world. GPS, lines of prospecting across the Canadian North, where everything is cut with lines through the forest. Seismic activities, sonar in the ocean, blasting the ocean with sound so that the whales go deaf or go crazy and crash into the land and die. All of these things we're kind of going out and framing the world in so many different ways. And now others are saying, let's go to Mars. Earth is no good anymore. Let's go to Mars. So there's a real kind of, obstinate lack of awareness that is going on, which, obviously we've got climate change right now. We've got here in Vellore in the south of India, we've got this peculiar early monsoon going on, which rattles a lot of people. They're thinking, how can the monsoon start in the middle of May? We haven't even reached the full extent of our hot, dry season. And people are feeling rattled by that. But it's like when you throw the dirt on the plant, it will still grow. It will come growing through the ground anyway. So now I'm going to jump over to something which relates to this concealing and starts to get into the yoga. I think a lot of you are familiar with the first 4 slokas of the Yoga Sutra. So I've used 2 translations here. The one by Deshpande has been recently republished by the Heartfulness Publishing in its original form, basically without any real changes, except for a couple of forewords and an essay. And I don't know if I have to describe it. I think you all know what it's about. It defines what yoga is and what it's for, and basically how it works in 4 lines, which you have to unpack. And of course, it's unpacked all through the Yoga Sutra, but you can unpack these 4 lines and learn, in one sense, after 20 years of practicing yoga, you can unpack it quite quickly because 20 years of practice helps you to understand these things. So there's a few key words here that I wanted to use to bring out is the idea of ideational choice making. Yoga is a state of being in which the ideational choice making movement of the mind slows down and comes to a stop. How does that not contradict the machine ages that we're living in? The freedom of choice. All of our young people, and since I was young, the 1960s, like I'm not a baby boomer, I'm like at the tail end. So I watched the hippies. I watched all of those people when I was growing up in the West act free, be free, free love, freedom to not even wear clothes, right? And my life is my choice. I have the freedom of choice to live how I want. Now, they weren't going against themselves. They were going against power that was pushing them down and saying, you have to behave a certain way. And they had disagreed and caused a great revolution in parenting and everything else. And what we have now at the end of neoliberalism is what they created as they got older. They created the same world even worse than it was before as a generation, but that's something else. So choice making has created a lot of problems in our world. It has become expressed in our world. It's not just the individual, but by the freedom that we gained through democracy and through our cultural allowances, we have started to make choices. And the one idea is to make smart choices, to become wiser, to become more knowledgeable. But I think in India, we know that these things are like a circle, right? Sure, one person or a whole culture, and then boom, it goes back to the beginning again, and in a different way. You end up with the same problem in different ways coming up generation or age or epoch after epoch, perhaps. But there's forward motion. So now the other thing that is here is the need to for it to come to a stop. When we look at Vivekananda's approach to translating this, he comes up with a term called the modified mind and the unmodified mind. And the unmodified mind is the original state or the state we want to achieve, whichever way you want to look at it. Maybe there was no original unmodified mind. Maybe those questions, when they came, when consciousness bubbled up and became primary, those problems were immediate as well. Maybe there's more than two siblings. Maybe the third one is trouble. And so we have at least the intent to go that way. And there's the discussion about the downward motion of divinity as it expands from Kshob, and the world is an infinite multitude of variations and possibilities. And the human consciousness pushes against that and tries to make its own unities, which are this idea of choice making, make its own world. That is what the big one version of the issue is. So when we talk about the modified mind and unmodifying the mind, when we look at the environment, we are modifying the environment to our needs. But what is an unmodified modification? So this talk that I'm giving now is not so much about the environment and yoga, the environment, describing the environment and architecture, but the environment and yoga automatically means we have to ask those questions, right? So if you look at the modified environments that we're making, which are now causing climate change, which is a climate catastrophe, not to mention 60 million displaced people due to wars and other problems, and 1 billion people who don't have enough to eat, and more than 1 billion people who don't have a good place to live, right? So we're not succeeding very well at all, period. And so there's no question that the modifications that we have made in our environment need to be both a modification and an unmodification of what we've been doing. And so the question of modified mind and unmodified mind are directly related to the environment. And because we're conscious beings investing ourselves in the environment because we have to, then the whole idea of our inner awareness, our inner qualities comes into question. And that is where yoga and architecture fit together, in the sense that architecture is not the building. Architecture is the experience we have from whatever we've made in the environment, the spaces we've made and the structures we've made. So I wanted to focus on this mind slowing down and coming to a stop. I'm looking at my clock, so I'm hoping I'll be finished in time so that people can ask questions. Okay. And restraining the mind stuff from taking various forms. So the whole idea of like, how can it not take various forms? My body is a various form of a human being, you know, not that I have control over the form of my body when I'm born genetically, but I do have a control over if I'm going to be fat or skinny and other things like that. I wanted to take this to a discussion. Many of you might be familiar with Krishnamurti and Dr. David Bohm. They had a discussion of 13 sessions over a few years, done both in the UK and in California. They moved back and forth and did these 13 sessions. And one of the bigger points of it, and actually the namesake of the book, of the main book, there are 2 books published from it, but the main book, The Ending of Time, talks about how when we as human beings see the world transforming, both the day and the night, or our children growing or our own selves changing and growing, we see that it takes time. And what Krishnamurti is saying, and David Bohm is getting involved in, is that this time is something that we take as part of our own inward world. So what we've done is we see the outside world and it's reflecting in our own being. And by doing that, we modify our mind. This is a modified mind. The mind is modified with time. So when I have a problem, I think I need time to solve it. And what Krishnamurti is saying is that, well, here, yes, that is, can the brain, dominated by time, not be subservient to it? He's asking if time is really necessary for the brain. And what he's saying, what they come down to is saying that process and learning and all of this kind of evolutionary, not evolutionary, but procedural efforts that we make are at best delaying, but usually they are holding off the change that we need. And that the change that we need is actually instantaneous. It's actually just, there's no reason for time in the mind. It's a habit, or it's something that we've put ourselves to over millennia of being conscious. We have modified the mind to think that we need time to change. Our thinking has become modified. And what he's saying when he says the ending of time is to end time in the mind. It's simple. There is no process. You just do it. And of course, I mean, you go, now that's a big one. I don't know. And then you're stuck because you're not allowed to have a process. It's supposed to be in 1 second, and you start to have trauma and you feel like you have to go see your psychiatrist, or you go to the temple and pray for it. But that's what he's saying. And that, I think it's a very good example of the idea of yoga and what it's trying to achieve, and a very, very, banner-sized idea. Like, yes, I know that my mind, when I have an idea, when an insight comes, it really didn't take any time and it didn't take any process. What was I doing until that happened? I was getting myself ready to have it happen, right? And so what yoga proposes is that we live in the state at all times where there is no process. We are in unity with ourselves, which is in unity with the world, which is in unity with nature. So that's one of my favorite examples. And I think that many of you can imagine how many more examples like that you can find, where it's very structural and very easy to define how our minds are modified. So going a step further, I wanted to just show this diagram, which is produced by Kamlesh Patel, who's the representative for heartfulness, or Sahaj Marg, who's my guru, who's my teacher now. And he put this out as a structure of yoga, all of it. But it's not all of it. If you look at it, you can see that the various levels, some of them are not very filled out. But for example, if you go for the Shat Sampati and then you come down to Shama, and then you see from Shama and Dhamma, you've got quite a lot of stuff going on. In Uparati and Sampadana, you don't have much. But I could imagine in a different era, in a different period, those would be expanded. Those would be lively and filled with different things that we're talking about. So you can see that the Yoga Sutras, only for this couple of millennia of years, perhaps, only for 2,000-3,000 years, which relates to the era of religions. We're having religions right now. And maybe once the whole need for religion passes, the effort will be in a different form. So this is a chart of yoga as it is now. And of course, we're living now, so let's focus on it. When you look at the way that the Ashtanga works, some of the things are very much about your own inner well-being, like pranayama, or even if you want to, about dhyana, about meditation, right? But some of the things have to be integrated with the world. So if you look at yama, being good conduct, well, where would you conduct yourself? Do I conduct myself with myself? In a certain way, yes. I mean, I have to conduct myself with myself well. But there's also nonviolence, and truthfulness, being truthful to yourself, being truthful to the world. They implicate the world much more directly than others. All of them implicate the whole world the same way, and all of them implicate yourself the same way. The only thing is we prioritize certain things. Like if I think about honesty, I can think about honesty to my brothers and sisters, or I can think honesty with myself. If I think about celibacy also, it's just hard for us to imagine both sides of it, the inward and the outer version, but all of them have that. And this is how we can start to understand the relationship between our practice as architecture and practice of yoga, and that they both have this relationship to the inward life and the outward life that can be focused and given method and given process. And as long as we don't treat this as a religion, as we treat it as a process and as a way that has been derived by thousands of people's lives working over millennia to understand and conceive of this, and then we can move forward with it and we can develop our world accordingly. This can't become a religion, right? This has to remain a process that we understand, and we drive forward into the future with it, or we gently flow into the future with it, whichever is your nature and whichever is your kind of work. So Raj Yoga would be these three, and we're aiming for finally a sense of complete unity and purity, where the requirement to touch on all of the emotional and heavy aspects of the world drops away, and we don't need it anymore. So in a way, samadhi is stopping the world or ending time, or it doesn't have a process, it just is. And that is the goal. That's the highest goal of leaving this practice and moving into practices which become unintelligible to words, which we have a lot of practice in trying to express them. So if we're going to yoga and purpose in light of art of the architect, I use this diagram where on the bottom we have knowledge and action, which everybody's involved in. And of course you can flip this triangle around, but I'm saying at the bottom right now, we have knowledge and action, which is what we use in order to enact our freedom of choice. We try to do what we can in the world. But I like to say that freedom of choice is very useless if you never choose anything, right? Having freedom of choice and constantly having it means fundamental irresponsibility, because as soon as you choose something, it becomes freedom of duty. Anything you choose, then you have committed to it. If you've seriously committed, it becomes duty. Choice can never stay choice for long. Like I can have the freedom to choose lots of wives, but once I choose one, I can't keep choosing them. And the freedom of choice goes away. A career, the clothes I'm wearing today, I don't have the freedom to wear 5,000 different shirts unless I stand naked in my bedroom all day long. As soon as I choose a shirt, I have a duty to that shirt to wear it proudly. And so the one that becomes the vertical vector is duty. And that is the measure of devotion and love. And finally, this triangle becomes just a line. The triangle becomes so vertical that it is indistinguishable from a line geometrically. It just becomes infinitely long, and the triangle becomes irrelevant. Once duty is attained, love is attained, devotion, bhakti, merger, unity, it reaches infinity, and you have a line. The triangle is gone. Taking it a different way, you can look at this aspiration as being the way to develop intention. And if you look at dwelling's purpose as being enabled by this process, by this triangle, where I would put the environment is everywhere. Dwelling, it's everywhere, right? But architecture resides in something I would call the public sphere, which we realize physically. So the physical realization of architecture in the environment is public and private space. But what we're realizing as architecture in the environment is public sphere. And the capacity of the public sphere is all of us together with our aspiration and intention. And the more it gets its purity, the more it gets its brilliance, the bigger the capacity and the more we can do. So as long as people live on this plane of jnana and karma, just going back and forth, never able to proceed in any kind of vertical aspiration, and that's the world we have right now. We remain in this dark area where we've just got buildings and we don't really have architecture, and the environment is suffering because our intentions on the environment have nothing to do with any of the higher aims that we actually have. And dwelling's purpose is forgotten. Dwelling's purpose is completely forgotten. So to sum up, I have a diagram like this, which is based on the three realms that we have in our bodies, in our lives: the Stula Sharir, the Shukshma Sharir, and the Atman. And the idea of this, which has been taught to me by my guides and masters rather than from reading books, is I've gained this stuff mostly verbally. I've read, but it doesn't make sense as much as feeling it through somebody's words, which I think is the tradition. That the body is, okay, I'll describe it my way. The body is something that we get is fixed. So you have epigenetics, which can change your actual genetic structure within a limited sphere, but over generations, it becomes transformation, but not in my life. And I can become more muscular, I can become this and that physically, but the body is what it is. And the soul, let's say it's fixed, it's immutable, or maybe it's not. But until you can actually have access to the soul, to your soul in this life, it's as good as solid and fixed. You can't, there's nothing to discuss. So I don't think we're actually, in terms of architecture and in terms of our practice, when you attain yoga, through yoga, more access, more awareness, or an awareness that can actually be the soul, then all of this talk that I'm doing is useless anyway. So it's like, you might as well say it's fixed. The mind, the rajasic, is where we're actually able to change things and evolve things and transform things. And even to the degree that it can change your genetics and it can change change your body, and it can change so much. So change is really in the middle area. So if I look at that structure I had before with how we go about entering a site of any kind in the world, an environment of any kind in the world, not just as an architect, not just as somebody who wants to plant a forest, you can kind of see this kind of structure that is there, which is expressed in all different parts of the Vastu, the Shilpa Shastra. It's expressed in the way we work with yoga. That the trouble with the mind, that it's modified or unmodified, is actually just something that we're misusing. It's not whether it should be unmodified or modified, although that's a big issue. The main thing is that we are misusing what we have to work with. And the environment, be it the room I'm in, my clothes, my body is part of the environment. Even my mind is part of the environment, because when you pass out of this life, you leave the freedom of choice behind. You leave so much of your capacity of mind behind, because it's part of life. So that is how, to my mind, that's a way to understand the way yoga works together with it. Another's talk would be to go more in detail about actual yogic practice and the environment, which I didn't do here, because I think that the whole orientation, I wanted to talk about the orientation today. So finally, this diagram kind of talks about the different layers. On the bottom, you have the body. Outside of the body, you have the building or the clothing or the car or the boat or the structure of my city. And then around that, you have dwelling, which in the drawing is blue, because the dwelling starts to become less physical. The dwelling is more of what I'm doing, and it relates more to the mind. It's dwelling is where the mind and your life as a whole being starts to meet. Then around that, I've framed architecture, maybe too big because I'm an architect, it might be a little too big, but you see where I've written measurelessness and measure. So architecture gives measure to the unmeasured, or the measurelessness. It gives measure to the needful, so that what we have as our intention and as our aspiration can be brought into the world as something that we can live with. And to live with it, I mean, you want to live with it in a positive way, and you ask, what is the positive way? Well, I want to support what my goal in life is. Well, what is your goal in life? And there you end up with the big riddle, right? What is the goal of life? And that's where architecture's superordinate program exists. So on the right, I'm writing architectural practice. Well, right now we have disjunct architectural practice. It is architecture that conceals the possibility of architecture. So it's still architecture in a certain sense, but it's actually impacted. It reverses on itself, and it doesn't really tell you anything about the human being, except that it's not doing its dharma. It's not finishing its job. So what comes in? Discrimination, viveka, and a space of differentiation. Architecture really right now needs to be a space of differentiation. Our understanding of the environment needs to be a space of differentiation. So when you make your garden, or when you even go outside to drive your car, you should be feeling what that car is doing to the world. Every car is damaging the world. The existence of the car, the use of the car is damaging the world. Every second you're using it. Every second you use that car, you're damaging the world. Can you escape from that? Is there dharma in that? Is there a purpose in it? Do you need to do that? Can you give up the car? Or what would you have to do in order to give up the car? This is part of architectural education. Every project you get in school is like, can we use public transit? Can we make bicycle lanes? That's been going on for 30 years. The built world doesn't show it, but the architects have been learning it for 30 years. On the other side, you have very familiar words, you know. I use the 4 major captions in the yoga diagram on the raison d'être of life. What is the goal of life, right? So in our world, we're dwelling in the world and we're dwelling within. And our dwelling within is in the world in part. But of course, we're looking into an infinity from our hearts, from our individual persons. We're always looking into an infinity and understanding that infinity and bringing it into our lives. That's yoga. So my final slide here is the work today is to unconceal the environment, to unconceal the environment. Because right now, our generic everyday life, almost everything we do is destroying our planet. Almost everything. There's no escape from it. And the work of tomorrow is to presence architecture, which is to presence the worldly truth of being conscious in a way that it serves our yogic principles, in a way that it serves our yogic truth. But until we can't do that yet, we have a big truth to live through before we can even do that. individuals can do it. Little projects can do it. Each little project can do it. And perhaps the little projects adding up are the unconcealing of the environment. Little choices that we make. That might be true. But I think that's where I'll leave it today. So, thank you.
Participants, if you have any question, you can raise your questions or put it in the chat box.
Yes, anybody?
Yes, Brijesh, sir, you have any question?
Yeah, anybody can ask. I think I see
Sir,
one hand.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Really, definitely we will become architects of yoga and yoga therapy tomorrow. You have nicely related Patanjali Yoga Sutras, architecture, and yoga. So, see, you have mentioned many things. So, you please tell us how to become the real architect in yoga and what we should do to become a real yoga architect. So, what we have to do as
Yeah, that's an
teaching
interesting
yoga
question.
as well as giving yoga therapy.
Well, giving yoga therapy, unfortunately,
Yes, I'm a medical doctor. So
I missed that talk yesterday. So yoga therapy, I don't
Yeah.
really know exactly what the terms of that would be, because to me, I mean, I guess there's the stage, you know, if you're not well, I guess the definition of wellness would be, can you still function? Can you still function? And if you can function, then you can participate in yoga. So like if you have mental problems, you might not be able to meditate, right? Because your mind can't do it. You can't organize your mind well enough. So first of all, you have to solve that problem before you can actually do the evolutionary practical process. So when you talk about therapy, I'm not quite sure where your question stops with define how you define therapy, because I wouldn't think of yoga as therapy in the typical medical sense. It's intended, I think, to be a process of a living, healthy person who, just like you go to the gym and you start lifting weights, you're doing a process to grow and to evolve your body in its limited way. Whereas in yoga, the infinity is the limit, right? It's infinite. So when you're working yogically, you're building. Now, if you consider the world and you accept it as it is, and you don't say, oh, the world is a total mess and first we have to fix it, which I just finished saying actually at the end. I said, like, how can we, I was speaking about architecture and about, if you have a city, like I'm in Chennai right now and I'm looking out at the city and I'm seeing like this thing that's out there, which has little holes in it where there are trees which are growing. There's so many trees in Chennai where they're amazing trees, which have so much personality and so much life. And they're sticking right out of the pavement, right? Squished between two buildings and just still growing vibrantly. So you could begin to change the city bit by bit. And I guess the implication would be, boy, your question, how can you become an architect of yoga or a yoga architect? What I'm saying is that the practices that yoga has brought forward for thousands of years can educate architectural practice to develop new approach now in its realm of influence, right? If somebody's practiced yoga and they're not an architect, they might say, I'm not qualified to be an architect. I don't know anything about it. But the idea of yoga as a personal practice, remember I said that an architect, all of us are architects, and only some of us are practicing who to make environments as they need to be. Or all of us are practicing architecture when we have our own property and we choose what to do with our own property, which is a piece of environment, if we accept that we have property, right? So the basic idea is that if we are people who are taking yoga seriously, if we're really practicing, the transformation of what you do in the world will come by itself. That's one answer. The second one is, my experience is I had to drop out of practice completely because the difference between what is being done in architecture professionally and what yoga implies is so great, there's no incremental transformation possible for a professional. It's not incremental because it's just an entirely different approach. So the bottom line is it's very experimental, it's very new, and we've gone very far down a dead-end road, and it's very, very hard to turn around. That's what I would tell you. If you want to become an architect of yoga, like your question was framed, it's not something that has been given to us as a set of instructions. It's time to make the instructions, is my position.
Linga ma'am, can you interpret your question? It's not clear. We have to do for avoid scientific improvement. The question is not clear.
We have to do to, is that in the chat?
Yeah.
We have to do for avoid scientific improvement. Is this possible? I can interpret this as saying you're questioning that science is helping us to improve the world. And I agree with you. I think this has to be questioned. The one thing I didn't mention in this talk is that scientific, in the modern sense, scientific study is based on the question that can be refuted. So you set up a proposition and you see if it's true or not. Science doesn't include the things where you can't ask a good question, scientific question. And what happens is that some people have become very extremist, and they don't think that anything that can't be asked in a good scientific question can even be relevant. And this is how people get rid of the idea of God. They can also, while they're at it, get rid of the idea of consciousness. And when they're going that far, they can get rid of the idea of the human being at all. And that's why some people think that AI, for example, artificial intelligence, will someday supersede humanity, which looked at from a yogic point of view is completely ridiculous and farcical, because unless machines can be born with souls, unless machines can be incarnations of some devic power which humanity has, which is possible. It's possible. If we facilitate machines, then they might become born, right? I mean, we're thinking science fiction here, right? But in general, the technologies we use in the cities and the technology we use in our homes, the main reason they are all destructive is because science can't ask about those things which are truly to do with consciousness and life. And so our mechanisms and our ways are exclusive of basically life. And, you know, one or two things doesn't matter. But if our whole life is based on all of that mechanism, which is now almost 100% the way we work, it becomes a dominant force. And so questioning science as it is very, very important.
Vidashri is saying trees can also sense our positive and negative thinking. It will be shown in their growth.
Oh, can you repeat that, please?
Trees can sense our positive and negative thinking, and it will be shown in their growth, the plant growth.
positive and negative thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
Or energies, the trees can also perceive.
oh yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think she's trying to
I
make.
think I've been told, I haven't personally experienced this, but I've been told that trees maintain, can hold whatever condition human beings have. Like if we talk about prana, and if we talk about the life force that puts us here in the planet, if it's made very positive and very pure, apparently trees can hold on to that energy. So if you have a place of meditation, or if you have a place even for your family where you want to maintain a strong feeling of positivity, as long as you can generate that positivity, I've understood that trees are like they retain it. They want that. They are able to nurture that and keep it intact. Does that answer your question? Certainly trees,
Yes.
there's no reason ever to cut a tree, you know, and when you cut a tree, it's not just a bunch of wood. I think we don't understand trees very well at all. I think we have to work a lot on understanding trees.
Dr. Subbulakshmi from FIST Maher. She's asking a question: space, consciousness, and architecture, the relationship. Please throw some light on that.
Well, in Vedic reality, the way I understand it is that there was always space. The architect Ganapati Sthapati, he used to say that Maya, or the universe as it is represented by circles, and the space is represented by squares, and our consciousness is represented by squares and cubes, and he went from there to differentiate it like that. The other way is that the universe is time. It's so simplistic, you know, and it's hard to answer that right now, but the universe is time added to space. But we as human beings don't really understand time at all. We have the theory of relativity, which most people don't know anything about and can't grasp it. It's very hard to grasp. Even the theory of relativity, which is very much scientific, doesn't really talk about life. But the idea that light has a finite speed and that time doesn't really exist in the universe. Time, everything has different times. If you went to live on Jupiter, if you could handle 9 Gs, and you came back and met your twin brother after 50 years, well, one of you would already be long dead. And the only reason it's relevant is if you meet again. If you never meet, you both have the same length of life. It's just that time itself it runs at different speeds, if you will, which doesn't make sense either. But the structure of the universe and time is completely, absolutely unknown to most of us. We don't understand it. So the relationship between time and space and architecture, you know, I don't think you have to get into the philosophy of it to work with it at that level in our environment. I don't think we need to know that to be doing the right thing. So I'm kind of not answering your question sideways, because to say that we know something about time is fruitless. We don't know what time is, right?
Question: what if we started analyzing that every action of ours is creating a negative impact on the creation and becomes stress due to that consciousness?
Yeah. Well, if you become stressed, what can you do about it? The first thing that takes away stress is to take action, right? and you can take action for yourself. You meditate seriously, and you develop an understanding, because the thing is, you're not to blame, and you can't change the world. And the only way you can have impact is to begin to create an identity or a being which starts to encompass more than just yourself. A tiny little heart like this, right, grows and grows and grows as you do the right thing for yourself. And yoga is, I've been practicing Sahaj Marg yoga for not yet 30 years. I'm very slow. I wish I was 30 months, but it's 30 years. And all I can say is that's step one. Feeling stressed would mean that you're trying to take responsibility for things that you can't take responsibility for, either because they're not your responsibility at all, or you haven't made yourself capable. So like if I have a huge rock that needs to be moved and I cannot pick it up, do I feel stressed? Maybe, because I need to have that rock moved, right? I might feel stressed because that rock needs to be moved, but I know I can't lift a 400-pound rock. I know that it's never going to be in my capability to lift a 400-pound rock. So at least on that level, I don't feel stressed, right? But if you consider the problems with the environment to be like a 400-pound rock that you can never lift, ever, then you start to scratch your chin and you say, well, what in the world does that mean? And your idea of being stressed about a 400-pound rock would transform into, what in the world am I going to do about this rock, right? It's not stressful. It's like figuring out what to do. Like, can you go around it? You have to accept the truth that if I'm drinking out of this bottle of water, there are 10 things wrong with drinking out of this bottle of water. And I'm drinking out of the bottle of water. Actually, being in India has helped me to understand that. And if I'm from Canada, which I am, or Austria, we complain. We say, I reject all bottles of water. And I reject anybody who drinks out of a bottle of water, plastic one. I reject all of that, right? You announce it. And things like that. But here, there's this idea that, well, the world, it just keeps going, right? And no matter what happens, it keeps going. And you kind of go into that flow and you keep going. So you're in a very good environment not to feel stress. Please don't feel stress.
I think we have the same question related to that. Some modifications were done to restore Leaning Tower of Pisa. Like that, can we do any modifications for this current busy world with less ethics and values?
Yes. Think about a war. People come off the battlefield and they're injured, and immediately you have to do triage, you have to help. We always have to be helping each other. We always have to be helping the world. That's got to be going on. So, you fix the Leaning Tower of Pisa by freezing the ground or whatever they did. I can't remember exactly what they did, but they stopped it from tilting more. But you know what? It's not standing straight, right? The fundamental problem of the tower is not fixed. That the fact that it sank on one side and it began to tilt. All they've done is made sure it doesn't fall over. And they're not even sure about that, right? It's definitely slowed it down. So if we look at our world and you say it's a Leaning Tower of Pisa, another allegory, it's my second allegory of the day, or you brought it up. If the environment is leaning, the one advantage we have is that nature wants to correct itself. Nature is always correcting itself. Maya is correcting itself. My body is correcting itself. It's rebuilding itself, right? You know that all the nerves, all the nerves in your body are not more than 9 months old. Your belly is not more than 3 weeks old. Your whole body is replaced completely every 7 years. Your body is trying to fix itself at all times. The Leaning Tower of Pisa can't fix itself, right? So all we have to do is understand to let nature do what it needs to do in a way, it's going to do what it needs to do anyway. The question is, how many of us are going to survive? Right? That's actually the real question. It's not actually about nature at all. It's about how many human beings are going to survive now. We're going to be reduced. I mean, that's for sure already. We're going to be reduced in numbers by a tremendous amount. But that's the real question, not nature.
We will go with our last question.
Okay.
Sometimes when we are doing some work, we feel like it will go wrong. Is that an inner instinct or negative inner thought that make the work again go wrong?
Wow. I guess that's interesting to think whether, to me, there's two answers to that. How good is your intuition? Are you listening to your intuition? Are you able to hear it? Hear your own voice telling you what might be important to do? Or is that wrongness your ego speaking? And if it's your ego speaking, then it's likely that it's going to make problems come up. And so this is where the word, where discrimination comes in, viveka, right? That's where you have to, that's actually your own work to learn to discriminate, which of course Raj Yoga is, you know, the way we picture it and the way we picture it in our practice is that, you know, maybe 2000 years ago, it took a lot of effort for somebody to begin to meditate. But over the past thousands of years, almost anybody can sit down to meditate. And if they can't, it's because of their personal issues that they have to resolve, not because they don't have the capacity. The capacity, I think, is innate. So what most practices now are saying is that we begin to meditate, or at least study concentration, or at least study relaxation. And then those other functions will come into play. So discrimination comes, which is what meditation is about, which is what yoga is about, quieting yourself down, becoming still. And then the rest of the information will come into you. Then you will start to know and hear what you need to hear. That's a very straight answer about yoga and practice, right? That doesn't have much to do with the environment or with architecture. It's do your practice, or pray for someone to show you the way, and they will come.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering all the questions. The secret of outermost space is to be found in the innermost space. Dwelling from outward to inward is moving from architect to spirituality. Architects rightly apprehend the connection between the surrounding built environment and the psychosocial life of the individual. They believed in the transformative potential of architecture in facilitating the overcoming contraindications that people and indeed societies felt within themselves, and then attainment of a relaxed equipoise instead. They emphasize the overcoming of dualities, the forced separation of interiors from exterior as the key to wholesome and harmonious building and communities. First control the mind, then stop the mind. The result is your true self. You are not this body, this mind, you are something else. The material world is constantly changing. This changeful world is not you. The only unchangeable thing within you is the consciousness. You use the body and mind to understand this, but experience occurs when you go beyond this body and mind. So stop the mind, the experience comes, experience the true self. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Thank you, sir. You are on mute, sir.
That was everything. I didn't need to do this. That was it.
I got it rightly. I think so.
You wrote that?
I put it all the things together.
Wow. That's great.
Not my words, sir. Please, it is not my words. Someone I have collected.
Wow, that's amazing.
But the concept I'm trying to understand. I think it is correct.
It's very nice.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Now I hand over the session to Nalini.
So our next session on Yoga and Arts by Dr. Pramod Adiji, who is the senior spiritual scientist, head and director of Siddha Veda community, and founder head of Vasudaika Kutumbam International, a non-profit group promoting health and universal wellness. So before introducing our chief guest, I would like to give a small introduction about him. So Dr. Pramod Adiji is also a senior Vedanta teacher at Vedanta Center in Washington, D.C. And he is a board member at Washington and Interfaith Institute. He also advocates yoga, pranayama, meditation, and selfless service as a path to inner and outer progress and peace. He learned Vedanta, neuroscience, yoga, Ayurvedic, Tantra, Kundalini, Prana science in traditional classic way through Guru Shishya Parampara from some of the great teachers in both east and west of the subject. He also empowers youth, women through multiple social causes groups and universities by taking to them and working with them, creating dynamic solutions for healing their complexities in multiple ways. He is a sage scientist practicing spirituality through exploration with science and collaborates with scientists at ISERV, a scientific body with scientists doing research on Vedas, to understand the beauty and reality of the nature, body, mind, and the cosmos. He has been building partnership with many local peace activities, religious leaders of other faiths to spread the message of universal oneness, and also has been working actively with local homeless shelters, orphan houses, senior citizens, care groups, etc. in US as well as in India. He also advocates a philosophy of self-transcendence, the effort to make continual progress spiritually, mentally, physically, and integrally. He is also part of multiple local community group that focuses and organizes many community awareness and health awareness events for kids and adults. Professionally, he works as a senior director in IT. I welcome you, sir, and over the session to you.
Thank you for the generous introduction, Amma. Again, my name is Pramod Adi. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just checking. Okay, wonderful. It's a marvelous, a beautiful Friday morning here in Washington, D.C. And it's always such a happy thing to connect early in the morning with such beautiful souls talking about such a sacred subject, which is very close to my heart. I've been groomed into this very early in my life at the sacred feet of my father and many gurus. And over the last many decades, I grew up in the influence of yoga, Vedanta, spirituality, which in a mystical way, it's carved my life in a very beautiful way. And the way you pursue this world, the way you pursue this life, and it makes you feel everything around you is so beautiful already. We keep running around in pursuit of happiness everywhere, but little do we know that we are the very happiness. The innate nature of us is happiness already. It's like the deer, you know, the kasturi deer. It smells kasturi. It runs around everywhere in pursuit of that smell, but little does it know that it's coming from its very womb, from its very navel. So that's what you are, the magical being that you are. So thank you, dear friends. Thank you for all the faculty at Maher. Thank you to Dr. Elangovanji, who contacted me a couple of weeks ago. And when he asked me to speak some things on yoga and art on this sacred communion here. I felt very privileged to share some of my experiences. Not that I'm any greater or anything. This is a sacred communion, and it's an opportunity to express the beauty. So again, that amazing, generous introduction. What it basically taught me all these years of sadhana is, end of the day, you're nobody, you're nothing. At the same time, you're everything, everything and everyone. So when you talk about yoga and art, such a beautiful subject. What is not art? When Michael was talking earlier, one of the comments that was made is all the manifestation, manifestation that you see, the beauty that's everything and everywhere. It's nothing but art. There are only two things. My daughter asked, when me and my daughter, we have this wonderful chats in the mountaintop when we go for retreats. She made an amazing observation. She says, Appa, there are only two things that I can see. One is man created world, and then where is God created world. That's all there is. All the buildings and everything we created. It's the beauty of human art. We created that building, but where did it come from again? From the Panchabhutas. Who created that? Look at the sacred tree. Look at the sacred the sky. Who created it? What created it? The cosmic forces which is carving. There is an artist right there already. It's beyond human. And that beautiful cosmic force, which is beyond human, is also experiencing the humanness through you. And all that you're creating, the art, well, you can put whatever your name below it. It's beyond the body, it's beyond the mind. Every bit of art that you see around, music, dance, painting, singing, many plethora of ways of expression. But now, where does yoga fit in here? Why is not everybody an artist then? Or an artist who has all the right skills has its ups and downs too. And sometimes I have seen in my own close communion, people who can't perform, people who can't be the best artists, though they have everything in them. That incredible high that comes with being in the flow of artistic expression falls in them sometimes. Whether you're an amateur photographer or a professional filmmaker, or you love knitting or weekend woodworker, art making, it can give you the feeling of being a complete present, awake and alive. So what is it that happens, especially in the modern times? There are so many plethora of ways of dragging you down, emotionally, physically, mentally. And the way it affects an artist, forget about he or she connecting the divine within, they fall so low into depression and anxieties. I have personally seen them. We have heard many stories of people who go into depression and anxiety and suicides. So that is where the practice of yoga comes in. See, while yoga is often thought of as a tool to help us find ease in the body, quiet the mind and get in touch with our true nature, it can also be a way of helping us tap and mind our creative selves. Meditation and yoga grant us access to the deep places of our psyche and consciousness that inspire creative ideas to emerge, while simultaneously offering us tools to work with some of our biggest obstacles as artists. No matter what kind of art you call your own, your yoga practice can more fully connect you with your creative mind, body, and soul. See, the biggest, even if you're not a professional artist, even if you are just making that beautiful dish at home, you want to make your daughter happy, you want to make your your family happy, and you want to cook the happiest meal for them on that weekend. That's an art right there. But all the grandeur plans you made to make that meal, something happened, you were multitasking or whatever, certain blockages in your mind, that whole meal that you want to make, have you seen that happen? What just happened there? It's nothing but, at the level of outer, the action that you're performing, everybody did just that. But a seeker, a sadhaka knows it's nothing but the distraction of the mind. You got distracted. For any task to be beautiful, it needs an absolute synchronization of your breath, your body, and the mind. And when they get disaligned, any action, anything that you're performing will have a problem. And this proves even worse for an artist. Just imagine a musician trying to perform live in front of 100 people or 1,000 people. And he doesn't have this synchronization. A small mistake can cost his entire career. So, the practice of yoga, I'll tell you something. A lot of out here in the West, even before yoga was so popular here, thanks to the international yoga events, and yoga now became kind of a mainstream in West and East and everywhere throughout the world. But even before that too, it's amazing to see people would practice techniques that are yogic, but they don't call it as yoga. All artists. Because yoga is a natural science. What religion, what do you need to belong to when you're breathing? It's just a natural process. So, artistic expression can be deeply fulfilling, but accessing creativity isn't always easy. Creativity arises naturally in states of stillness and presence, which can be elusive when we are distracted by daily preoccupations and scattered thoughts, isn't it? This is why yoga is such a gift for the artist. When we practice awareness in asana, pranayama, and meditation, we learn to see and let go of the distractions of the mind. It is from this place of clear seeing that inspiration springs forth. The ability to quiet the thinking mind also gives us access to a felt sense. See, I keep saying this in my satsangs. You're not the body, you're not the mind, you're not the name, nor you're the form, nor you're the gender. You're the walking universe. The universe is temporarily experiencing the humanness. Carl Sagan, and there are many, many amazing cosmologists who say from the dawn of human creation till it it vanishes from this planet, it is only 1 to the power of 100th billionth second. That's how granddad this universe is. And this manifestation of of all the life species that you're seeing now, it's only a speck of its creation. And it is experiencing you and me right now as human. We are not experiencing the universe. The universe is experiencing you as human. It's experiencing as human. And the universe expresses itself as spontaneous creative energy with a focus on intersection between interdisciplinary performance and contemplative practice. The task of that yogic artist is mostly just to get out of the way. That's why the best of a dancer happens when he removes the eye picture out of it. You observe carefully, you observe a beautiful artist, a beautiful painter, a beautiful singer. So if you are a yogi, you will very clearly know that the person, the individuality is not there at that point of time. That sense of I am is reconfigured with ego, as it doesn't even exist at those moments. It's the very divine. That's why if you look at all the ancient musicians, Tyagaraja Swami, Sri Ramadasu, Annamacharyas, why are those divine chants even now we keep repeating them again and again? Because it spring forth from the depths of their creative energy. It's that universe itself. It expressed itself, and they last forever. It's the divine itself. It comes from that depths of quiet mind. It's an expression. See, this ability to quiet the thinking mind also gives us access to felt sense, word, color, or movement. Choices don't come from practical considerations. They come from the intuition and the deeper places of seeing. When I'm really in the heart of creative practice, I'm tuning into my aesthetic ear, eye, and the mind. When you are worldly, the same senses work in a different way. But as soon as you have yoga in your life, it's like a remote control. We keep switching ourselves between the world and the yogi within you. See, the yogi within you is not something that's newly created. It has always been a part of you. It has always been a part of you. You know it or not. The yogi within you is not happening just because you enrolled into a yoga class or to a yoga university. It has always been a part of you. Unknowingly, you are always doing that in a different way. So when you start practicing this though, through your guide, through your guru, through your teacher, you're tuning into those, you become aware, you become conscious of your own, the artist inside you. And that, my dear friends, is amazing. When you're conscious of your movements, of when you're creating that art, it changes everything. That's simple. But simple, it's not, it sounds simple, but it's a lifetime practice to become conscious of every movement that you do in your expression as an artist. I personally feel no money can come near it. As you tune into that aesthetic ear, aesthetic eye, the mind, why do you think a poet is writing a poem? Where is that coming from? It's that aesthetic eye, something he saw, a piece of carrot becomes the word of a poetry sometimes. As simple as a bee buzzing in the air in front of you becomes a poem. So how can you keep this channel on though? How? Because this seems to be always coming and going. This side of the yogi inside you is not continuous. He's falling and raising again. The practice of quietening the surface chatter of judgment, planning, comparing feels completely integral to my ability to tune into that place where inspiration is present, where creative choices are happening. The asana and pranayama help fuel the creative process by increasing and directing the flow of prana, the intelligent life force, through the energy conduits in your body. Asana and pranayama, they help fuel the creative process by increasing and directing the flow of prana, the intelligent life force. This continuous flow of breath and movement really gets your energy flowing and allows you to open up to the channel, the connection within the divine, the connection that's within your own, the divine within you. The yogic practice, it helps us overcome those creative blockages in our mind and body and significantly enhance energy, focus, and originality. It helps get the energy body moving, and the energy body is the source of creativity. When we take new and expansive shapes with the body, we are influenced to take new and expansive shapes within the mind. There is a way in which asana breaks up our habitual patterns of thought that keep that sense of freshness and creativity constricted. If I had to compare it with I love farming. I grew up in a farming background back in India, and here too, me and my wife, we take, it's my way of art. See, if writing is a crop, I'm trying to grow. And by doing an asana, by my yogic practices, I open the irrigation gates and all of this water flows into the field. When I sit down to write, I'm more available to myself and to the creative flow. And at that moment, and I very, very clearly know that it's not Pramod. It's not Pramod. It's just a name. It's a relative reality. A certain cosmic force is working through me. And when you're conscious at that moment, and that's the beauty. And I have some of my very beautiful friends. Stephen Ko, he's a pianist. Harikiran Khalsa. So they are all into music. And when I talk to them right here at the George Mason Center for Classical Arts, they're wonderful performers. Every year there's a huge congregation that happens. They tell me how much they practice yoga and how much it transforms what they are creating. And along with asana, they induce the powerful sacred induction of chanting along with yoga. Stephen Cove, he's a pianist, he says chanting takes his performance to a whole different level. He practices chanting before taking any creative effort. The repetition of sacred syllables, he says, helps boost his energy while simultaneously focusing his mind. Either it's as simple as Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, or as simple as Om. It starts to channel your energies in a certain way before undertaking any creative effort. There is a when you understand our Shastra and when you understand the culture in Sanatana Dharma, in just about in everything in its life formula that it has created, this has been a part of, it's like a formula. The way we live, the way we get up, the way you do your shower, the way you offer your prayers, the way you eat, the way you sleep. In Sanatana Dharma, it has been a formula. All the festivals you celebrate, the way you celebrate. Unfortunately, a lot of materialism is taking over, and the science of all this, science behind the culture, the science behind the festivals is vanishing. But if you carefully examine, decrypt, they are trying to make you, it's all yogic, to bring the best out of you. Who is not an artist? What is not an art? A housewife doing that amazing job in keeping the house so beautiful is that I go to some homes, my God, so beautifully maintained, the lawn, the inside, the outside. And the poor woman thinks I'm contributing nothing. When I used to work late in my office, I work for the US government, and sometimes my work demands pretty heavy hours. And when I'm coming out, when I'm going early in the morning, Carlos is a Mexican, is from Mexico, is the janitor. He does such a good job with cleaning all our office, bathrooms and everything. And when I'm leaving, he's the last one I see. And he does such a beautiful job. But then he tells himself, I'm just a janitor. Little does he know what a beautiful artist he is too. What is not an art? And who is not an artist? When you have your senses, your mind, your prana, your heart, at it. Your work is your worship. You're no different from what the universe is already doing. Of course, inspiration will only get an artist so far. In order for that energy to manifest as work of sculpture or poetry or musical composition, or artists need to be able to focus intensely on their work for hours at a time. The deeper practices of yoga, including dharana, the deep concentration, and dhyana, experiences a sense of oneness with the object of our concentration. Isn't that? I mean, sometimes let's say you're working something on your work, and sometimes you don't even know the lunchtime has passed. You sat down probably in the morning, and you're so in the dharana and dhyana of the work you are in, whatever work you are performing, you become so oneness with that object that you won't even feel the hunger pangs in your stomach. Why? What happened there? Simply focus. You became absolutely the one with that object of our concentration. There is no me and mine there. And when that happens, the absolute beauty comes out of you. And that, my dear friends, are powerful for training us to access and remain in a focused state of creative flow. See, new students of yoga often report that they can suddenly experience a different range of sensations in the body and that they feel more perceptive and sensitive to their surroundings. Discomfort that once felt like general lower back pain now felt specifically somewhere else. Sunsets might seem more colorful. Heartbreaks more complex. It's this deepening of awareness. It helps us to refine our artistic skills. Many Western and and Eastern artists, movie stars, popular pop singers, if you look at their daily routines, Bollywood, Collywood, Tollywood, anywhere. I'm not talking all of them, but some of them that I know of personally too. They have yoga in their life, which brings the best out of them. In yoga practice, you're focusing attention on a more subtle realm than usual. See, let's say you're standing in Trikonasana and you are feeling the lines of energy through your legs and your arms. What you're doing there is you're focusing on the subtle movements of the breath. This is the mental training to focus on aspects of awareness that are usually outside our perceptual range. As we become more and more perceptive in our yoga practice by examining our thoughts, by examining our movements, by examining our breath, we become more perceptive in other areas of life, including creating any kind of art. Again, like I said, art is not just something that you take a pencil or a pen and put it on a paper. Life itself is an art. Living itself is an art. What is not art? In your Jagruta Avastha, when you wake up till you sleep, everything that your senses are perceiving, tell me what is not an art? Art is not something that somebody labeled it as art. Through the eyes of the beholder, through the eyes of that conscious heart, I'm asking you, what is it that's not beautiful? Musicians may become more adept at distinguishing between subtle movements of the fingerprints on their instruments, Anything they want, the performance is happening, but they can be very conscious of those fingers that they are moving. Visual artists may tune into their wider range of shapes, colors, and textures. The dance is happening, and you're absolutely conscious of it. By mindfully observing and inspecting the full range of our experience on and off the mat, we pave the way to creating more authentic and nuanced art. Yoga does more than sharpen our technical skills as artists. It can also influence the themes we choose to express, the type of work we create, and the intention behind the art. While some find that their spiritual practices lead them to create mandala paintings or poems dedicated to the divine, the work doesn't have to contain spiritual imaginary or focus on joyful themes in order to express yogic sensibilities. A piece of art that is about destruction can be infinite and uplifting at the same time if it contains great awareness and comes from your whole humanity. Many artists observe that yoga has subtly or significantly shifted how they approach their craft. Yoga, it changes your voice as a writer or whatever your art is. They become more alive in detail, in syntax, in image. A painter, composer, and a performance artist, one of my friends, he notes that yoga and meditation, it helps him to be less structured and linear and more improvisational. He says these practices have shown him that inner life is fluid and doesn't follow the traditional narrative lines. That is very deep. Because when you talk about the blockages inside, which is hindering your flow, which is stopping you to be what you want to be, is none other than your own belief structure that you have created. They are like the boundaries. Let's say you have a very bad neighbor and you built a very strong wall. Imagine the same thing in the brain. These are all the boundaries, strong boundaries you created. This yogic practices, it will make you realize that, make you break those walls. And the flow becomes more, the inner life becomes more, it's like a fluid. And once you cripple those inner blockages, those emotions becomes clean. The creative journey is much more beautiful. The creative journey is one in which we expose our souls to the world. It is also the reason why emotions like doubt, fear, self-judgment, emotions that can cripple the creative impulse. Do you know these are all the most common things that they are very familiar to artists. One of my visual artist friend, she's also a yoga teacher, Amanda, she's working on a series of paintings of Hindu gods and goddesses. She says yoga practice and philosophy have not only influenced her subject matter, but have enabled her to create more from a place of bhakti and devotion. She says she has noticed that in art school, there was an obsession with the individual's personal stories. And she says that her own work as young artist did much of the same. She took a semester off from art school to travel to India and learned that the purpose of ancient art there was to evoke a state of bliss in the viewer. This was the kind of art that she has been longing to make something that would really uplift people's spirit. See, anything that you're creating, it's uplifting the world spirit. To create an art of that nature, we need to be something else. This ugly, chattery, judgmental, crippling, emotional mind is not the one. That's why a lot of people try into a lot of things. And they come ask me, why am I not successful? Why is somebody else successful? The secret is not something else. The secret is your yogic state of mind. I used to be at the George Washington University's, I worked there for almost 7 years. And we had a program called the Big Brother program. That's actually where I met Amanda. And Dr. Subramaniam, he was the head of the psychology team. So I used to tag along with him to visit the juvenile detention centers. So juvenile detention centers is nothing other than prisons for young underage kids. So we used to go visit there to counsel these kids, because these kids are in the jail, they are in the prison for a reason. Bad parenthood, wrong guidance, nobody to listen to, nobody to talk to. And Amanda, she used to go conduct yoga sessions there. And I used to go do counseling along with, after her yoga session, I would go there as part of the team to counsel them, teach them meditation. I'm not kidding. I'm not joking. A continuous effort with them for a certain period of time. Do you know the beauty they'll start to exhibit? These are the people in prisons. These people are in the prison for some of the most terrible, horrible things you would hear. Killings, drugs, violence, guns. But then, when you start seeing these young minds, once they're guided into a certain path for some period of time, the beauty they exhibit, either it's their singing, either it's their art, or as simple as a talk that's coming from the depth of their soul. It was so uplifting. I was there. I listened. The art they are expressing. So, my dear friends, I wanted to share with you, there's nothing called bad in this world. The bad happens because of circumstances, karma, prarabdha, whatever. But if there is a compassion in your heart, and you have that ability to go hold that hand and uplift that spirit in the wrongest and the baddest places, you got the patience, you got the tolerance. It is possible to see the beauty. It is possible to bring the beauty out of everybody. And that, my dear friends, is the power of to transform a person who got stuck in holding a gun and killing and drugs. And to see an artist come out of them. Isn't that what transformation is all about? And when you see this in experiential way, not talking and hearsay stories, it builds you such a strong confidence into the magic that yoga can do. So, and also I want to touch about the art of non-attachment. See, the creative journey is one in which we expose our souls to the world. This can be tremendously rewarding aspect of being an artist. To have the opportunity to connect with others on a deep yet subtle level. See, when you are able to connect with others on a deep yet subtle level, a lot of my friends, during the COVID times, we used to meet people on this, just like this on the Zoom, across the world, South America, North America, Middle East, India, Asia, Europe. We never even met physically yet. but our ability to, but we have the opportunity to connect with them on a deep level. It lasts you such long friendship, you know. These connections are real. These friends are real. In this world, in this big wide world, we have acquaintances and we got friends. We think acquaintances as friends, but they are just acquaintances. The tremendous rewarding aspect of being an artist, when you're able to connect with others at a deep, subtle level, it builds you that friendship, a friendship that's so rewarding. It help you transform from within. I'm sharing you all my personal stories. That's the power of connecting from in depth. Our very friend here, Ratna Sabhapati ji or Dr. Elongavan, I never even met them physically yet. But the deep respect I share with them or they share with me is at a whole separate level. That's the power of connecting from deep within. Because at that point, it's not Pramod interacting with somebody. It's the power of Namaste. Namaste is the divine in me is same as the divine in you. The divinity is interacting with itself. And such connections are always artistic. But it is also the reasons why emotions like doubt, fear, and self-judgment, emotions that can cripple the creative impulse, is what that kills the art in the artists. One of the things that yoga practices can teach us as artists is to bypass the judge and just make the thing and let the chips fall as they may. One of the powerful antidotes I personally believe in my own life is the practice of Vairagya. As a Vedanta teacher, Viveka and Vairagya, the power of non-attachment. This principle teaches us to cultivate dispassion and let go of expectations by diligently observing the mind without reacting to, clinging to, or rejecting anything. So with regular practice of Vairagya, we become to recognize that our negative emotions are not permanent truths. Just yesterday, I was talking to my daughter about some grades and school system and everything, and how she prepared everything. She prepared so well for her school test. But just before I was dropping her at the school, she was like, "Appa, what if I fail?" And then I simply said, "What if you pass? What if you get the gold medal?" And she's like, why is my brain not making me think positive though? I simply said, that's what many millions of our reptile, we evolved from being from reptile brain, and all these millions of years of evolution has never made our brain get away from that reptile thinking. When we are all reptiles, when the man wasn't walking on this planet and we were something else, one sensitive being, two sensitive being, three sensitive being, four sensitive being, five sensitive being. Now we are six sensitive beings. It's a long period of evolution. And when you are in the lower level of mental evolution, the fear is a predominant thing. Look at all the the animals around us. A cow, can you ever imagine, from its dawn of creation of a cow, what it has been doing is what it is doing now. It has never changed its life. Or a dog. From the time a dog came to this planet, till now, it is just doing what it has been doing. Or a bird, eating, mating, living out of fear. But look at us as a human being. We were a caveman, but now we are exploring the cosmology. We're visiting the deep cosmos. We're creating artificial intelligence. We're creating robots. We invented vast different technology. The point I'm trying to make is, while we are making all this progress, a certain part of your brain, the negative emotions, the negative thoughts, the negativity in general, the fear, our brains are so well trained from this millions of years of evolution, from the reptile thinking into that fear. Fear that has never gone away from. So certain part of you is still stuck with that. And do you know the one mechanism to dissolve that state of your thought process, to bring the creativity process out of you, is yoga. See, apple falls all the time. Apples fall all the time. Imagine you sitting under a tree, an apple is falling. A normal person, what he will do? He will take the apple, it fell on my head, and he will walk away. What made Newton just simply think the apple that fell on the floor, fell from the tree? That is yoga. It made him. It kicked up a whole different process of creative thinking, which made him invent a word called gravitation. All our physics is filled. Now look at us. See, when you experience judgment or perfectionism or self-criticism, it's just another thing to notice. If we notice it, it starts to lose its power. We are living in a world. The world has become a much more smaller village now. Back when maybe 40, 50, 60 years ago, we were all confined, by our region, by our boundaries, by our country. But now when you look at it, we are all connected. See, I'm here in Washington, DC, you're all in India. The world has become so small. So I'll tell you something. You will be subjected to a lot more judgment, a lot more criticism as you expose more and more to wider audience. For an artist, when he is expressing this, on the YouTube or different mechanisms, performing his art, he becomes subjected to self-judgment more. He falls prey to all this criticism he's getting. He loses his art for a period of time. Meditation or mindfulness techniques or yoga, it helps you to observe it. That's a powerful technique. Just be the awareness witness. And when you are experiencing this judgment or perfectionism or self-criticism, just notice it. It starts to lose its power. My dear friends, this is such, I teach this simple technique in various different, I created small different tools, and I take the schools to a lot of the public schools here in Washington, DC, in different counties, and I teach these techniques to the little children. Me and my team, we got such kudos, because from young age, when you teach this ability to be the awareful witness to your inner emotions and negative thoughts, the chances of the child to become a greatest artist in whatever the field they are in is high. And yoga practices can teach us as artists to bypass the judge and just make the things and let the chips fall as they may. True vairagya, of course, means resisting attachment, not only to failure and negative emotional states, but also to success and inflated feelings of accomplishments. One of the things as an art is you get kudos, criticisms. That's a normal drama. See, when you get excessive appreciation, you know what happens? People love to get appreciated. But what really happens, a sadhaka would know, a yogi would know, something inside you is getting inflated. It's your ego. That a person, once his ego gets inflated, I can guarantee you one thing: whatever the art you are performing, you set it for destruction already. Your ability to stay balanced, it teaches you that ability to stay balanced. For triumphs or disasters, you are samavarti, you are balanced, you are just. Because the person knows it's the divine's manifestation from within. I'm just a tool. Whatever your art is, there are those moments of difficulty when it all just looks like garbage, and moments of delusion when it all looks great. You need a way to ride those ups and downs, and yoga gives you that. By releasing us from both disappointments and excessive pride, we need yogas and its teachings on non-attachment, which can help us derive more joy from our artistic work. One of the things that I keep telling my daughter is, in the yogic path, there is no enemy. You're not here to impress the world. You are here to impress yourself. You're not comparing with somebody else. You're comparing you with you. That small switch, it changes everything. It makes you bring the best out of you. So one of the study that was done at the George Washington University, there is an university called the American University. It's in Washington, DC. They have a whole separate program for neuroscience and yoga. And one of the studies on the effects of yoga training on performance states of elite musicians. In that study, students from that music center, they have a postgraduate summer academy, and they practiced asana, meditations, and pranayama, and studied yoga philosophy while honing their craft. One of the main things noticed during the study was how very attached to the results the students were. If they had not played a performance as well as they had hoped, and they had impossibly high standards for themselves, they would simply be devastated. Whatever your art is, there are those moments of difficulty when it all just looks like garbage, and moments of delusion when it all looks great. You need a way to ride those ups and downs. All artists, they go through this problem. Especially when you are elite artists, they have impossibly very high standards for themselves. And as soon as something just happens, a slight hint of criticism, failure, they would simply be very devastated. Did we see many artists, news articles where they go into drugs and alcohol and substance abuse? That's because of this very same situation. There is a tremendous amount of clinging to outcome in professional musicians. They think this is somehow salutary. They don't realize that grasping creates a restlessness in the mind and actually interferes with their performance. Swami Dayananda Saraswati's ashram here in Pennsylvania, in Charlottesburg. I'm a lifelong student of Vedanta there. And, they teach Bhagavad Gita to artists. And in one of the sessions I was there, they emphasized the central message of surrendering the results of our action. Krishna teaches Arjuna to bring everything is God, but to let go of the outcome. It's the best teaching for artists. It helps the student to feel free to have joy again in their performances. Like I said again, what is not art? And where is not the artist? So this applies to everything. The devotional practice of trustful surrender, in which we offer the fruits of our effort to higher source, is one of the most profound ways for an artist to work with non-attachment. This practice has found to be very essential for anybody's for any artist's life. Once we approach the creative expression from the perspective of mindfulness and devotion, we begin to see art making itself as a spiritual practice. We begin to see art making itself as it serves the higher purpose. It helps us become more present in our daily lives and offers us an opportunity to connect more deeply with the universal creative force that resides in us all. So with that, my dear friends, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to share on this wonderful communion today on the power of yoga and art. So, Hari Om. And let me I think that gives a couple more minutes here. So anybody's got any questions, I would like to open it for any open discussion or anything else.
Thank you, sir. Now the session is open for question session. Participants, if you have any questions, kindly post in the chat box.
Thank you, Bhaskar ji, for your comments. Thank you, Dr. Shamala ji. Please, Dr.
Shamala, ma'am, you
Shamala,
can
please go ahead
proceed.
and ask your question.
Sir, thank you so much. I belongs to art family. My husband is a Carnatic vocalist. My
Wonderful.
brother-in-law is a mridangist. My
Ah,
sister-in-law is a violinist, and my mother-in-law is a music teacher who is teaching music for more than 50 years. But still, what I found, the stress, or I can say in Patanjali yogic bhasha,
yeah,
kleshas.
yeah,
So still, see, what I want to ask is these musicians or actors or anyone who is doing the act, that is their profession is what they are liking,
yes,
what they love, they are performing. But
yes.
still, in spite of that, why most of the artists are suffering, and they are see they are see they actually they are drawn into a pit of vices like alcohol,
Yes,
or so many even you come across me too. So
yeah,
many artists they have lost their reputation.
yeah.
So why it is so? Because see, what they love, what they like, they are doing it as a profession. So in spite
Mm,
of that, why it is
mm.
so? And
Yes, sir.
what yoga can offer to them,
Yes, yes,
irrespective of ages, whether it
yeah.
is 70 years, 40 years, 50 years, 10 years, even now among the kids,
Ah,
it is also creating a lot of tension. See, we have to
mm.
learn arts in a happy manner, but now that itself becomes a tension and stress.
Yes,
So
yes.
going to this class, that class, and they are not learning it happily,
Yes,
and so
yes.
they are unable to express. So those who cannot express, they cannot become artists. So what yoga and Vedanta, and doubly happy, I'm a Vedantic lover. So
Ah,
you uh,
God bless you. God bless
Vedantic
you.
lover. Yeah. So you please throw audience doubt. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, I'll tell you something very simple. This is not complex at all. See, when we are all kids, you know, um, in my street, right? I used to have so many friends. Um, as soon as in the evening, 5 o'clock, happens, 4 5, we are back from school. Remember our days, I'm not going to say the same thing now. Here in US, kids are stuck to gadgets and everything. But, back in at least our childhood days, we used to take the bat and somebody has the ball and we used to just play cricket, endless joy, lot of joy. The same cricket match, same people, same friends.
Yeah.
As soon as instead of a simple playing, it becomes a game. Hey, some inter-district competition, this competition, that competition. So much of stress. I want you to think about that simple example. It's got a very tremendous teaching. There is a difference between playing and there is a difference between gaming. The same play that we have been doing it as a joyful thing has become a game. See, when
Okay.
you're playing, there is no, is this a play? See, have you seen in my home, we have satsangs all the time, every weekend. We all adults, we are sitting and we take some Vedanta Paribhasha or Patanjali Yoga Sutras and we have a very serious discussion. And
Okay.
a simple butterfly comes into the home or just is flying around, in our garden. The children quickly they get up and they run for the butterfly, whereas we adults, the butterfly. We continued with our serious discussion. We lost our ability to be joyful for simple little things. Whereas you look at that little child, he'll go running behind the butterfly.
Yes. Yes.
See, the children, they have an innate, beautiful nature of being joyful. They like to play. We converted that playing nature into games.
Gaming nature.
Gaming nature. What happens once you convert something into a gaming nature? Outcomes.
Okay.
And once you are stuck in the expectations and outcomes, there you go. See, my daughter, when she was little, she did, they like to, little children, they always like to art, paint something. Like, Appa, see, I did something. It was simple, some lines, honestly, it was beautiful, but some simple lines. But as a parent, what will you say? Oh my God, what a beautiful painting you did. Oh,
It's
she
because
feels so
of
happy.
attachment.
Yeah, she
Because
feels
of
so happy.
attachment. Because
Exactly.
yeah.
She feels very happy with that. And now it doesn't stop right there. She'll go and she'll try to make it better. She'll bring you one more version. Isn't it? This keeps on growing and growing and growing. So my point, what I'm trying to say is, as long as you keep things joyful, like what I said earlier, yoga's teaching on non-attachment.
Okay.
See, we always known use beautiful, beautiful parables, simple examples. The lotus flower lives in a muddy water, but least does it get attached to the mud on it. You live in this world, you see, a boat, as long as it's sailing on the water, it's fine. But as soon as the water comes into the boat, it's a problem for the boat. Or the water going deep into the water, or the boat going deep into the water, it's trouble for the boat. But as long as it's floating on the water, its purpose is met, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Same thing with us. As an artist, you go express your beauty. Like I said, your competition is not with the world. Your ability to impress is not with the world. You impress yourself. Hey, I got only 20 marks this time. What can I do to myself? See, my competition is, what's happening right now is, hey, my competition is with with my neighbor who got 30 marks. How dare he gets 30 marks and I get only 20 marks? Instead of asking that question, just simply ask the other way. Hey, I got only 20 marks. What can I do with myself so that I can get 30 marks?
Okay, that is.
Your enemy is not outside. Your enemy is you with you.
Okay, correct.
So in that process, you try to, there is a self-empowerment. There is an ability to self-transform yourself. When you're comparing with the other, with outside somebody, there is a negativity. There's a competition. There is expectations, outcomes. And in that comparison mode, the artist crumbles himself. See, just simply imagine a wonderful artist, instead of he getting claps, somebody else, a newcomer who is performing better gets the claps. The kind of insecurity this artist feels is tremendous. And over a period of time, they become so insecure and intolerant on themselves. They resort. I have seen many, like I said, as a part of the Big Brother program, we visit not just prisons, a lot of drug rehabilitation centers. And this is across the board. These are all wonderful people, good people, but they self-destroyed themselves, all because they weren't taught, like you and me, the Shastra of Yoga or Bhagavad Gita or Vedanta. That's why for children, see, I keep telling this to parents wherever I go. We send our children to artificial intelligence and this competitions, that competitions. We are making more and more intelligent. We are making them very, very intelligent. Guess where are they going to show this intelligence on? Back on us. See, if you look at all the latest scams that are happening around the world, it takes, the person need to be very, very intelligent to do the scams. To do a scam, you cannot be a dumb. You need to be very, very intelligent to do that. But if you look at some of the saintful people, they are very intelligent too, but they had the character. They always had the beautiful grooming of character by their gurus or parents or teachers or Their upbringing. They had yoga, they had Bhagavad Gita, they had Vedanta, or as simple as a wonderful teaching at their home, character building teaching. See, we are not doing that in the modern times to the children anymore. We're making them, we're encouraging them more and more. I came across a parent who when I encouraged the boy to come to meditation, there's nothing wrong with my son. Why should they go into meditation? See, that is the current attitude of a lot of parents. To meditate is not about you having some problem. To meditate is as simple as you breathing. Can you live without breathing? No. Then how are you living without meditating every day? Yoga is a part of everyday thing. If you are eating every day, then why are you not doing yoga every day? Why are you not meditating every day? This current generation kids, I sometimes seriously get concerned for them. At least here in the West, so much of digital pollution, so much of wrong content in the media, social media, and everything that they are getting exposed to. And parents, it's very, very important. The proper teaching starts from the parents at home. Many kids into anxieties, depressions, mental disorders, young age. There's nothing wrong training them to become intelligent. Make them exposed to the greatest of the technologies, cyber security, artificial intelligence, whatever. But make sure they are, building their character too. Proper character plus intelligence makes the person great. Only intelligent, they makes them crooked. We're training them to become the next generation complex, scammers. So forget about they giving back the love to us as parents. They are going to use that intelligence, the crooked intelligence, on you someday. So.
Thank you, sir. And Jyoti ma'am, you have raised your hand. Do you have any question?
Namaste, Jyoti. Go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, sir. And one question from the chat. What if we started analyzing that every of our action is creating a negative impact on creation and become stressed due to that consciousness?
It's a small issue with the audio, Ma. If you don't mind, can you repeat the question again?
So if we start analyzing that every action of ours is creating some negative impact on creation and become stressed due to that consciousness, so what will happen?
See, there are two things, you can either concentrate, or you can either be in total awareness. See, when you're when you're doing the dharana and dhyana in deep concentration and experiencing a sense of oneness with the object of our concentration, unless the inner samskaras get better and better, in that oneness, as you become in the process of the deep concentration, your ability to have that negative traits is possible. It is possible. Like I said earlier again, when a person is swimming with the wave, it's easy. But for you to swim against the wave, it's not easy. So, like I said earlier, millions of evolution, millions of years of evolution. We were all, from a one sensed being, we evolved into getting two senses, and then we got three senses, four senses, five senses, sixth sense. Now we all are in a life manifestation where we now have sixth sense, buddhi kushalata. So for us to reach here, it wasn't easy. It was a very hard, very struggling process for our intelligence to reach its peak, which is what it is right now. But not all life species are like that. See, if I have a dog at home, but when the dog is looking at itself in the mirror, it doesn't know that it is itself. So it barks thinking that it's another dog. Whereas you and I, when we look in the mirror, we comb our hair, we put makeup, we make ourselves beautiful. Because you know that is you. You're not just conscious of yourself, you're conscious of everything around you. That's why you're learning what is that rock on that moon? What is that rock? What is this soil? What is this tree made of? What is this viruses consists of? But I want you to also know this much, that a certain part of your brain, with this millions of years of evolution, we still have that remnants, that relic of the fear. Evolving from a reptile brain into a conscious human brain, everything will have its residue still left. And one of that residue in our brain, I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm speaking from that angle. One of the residues in your brain is a constant buzzer about negativity and fear. That is not going to go. That is not going to go until you do something about it. So for a raw person, without cleaning and cleansing their inner samskaras and doing the dharana and dhyana, that's why, see, we have an eight limbs of yoga. Yama, niyamas. Why do you think our rishis created that scripture? That it's a formula. When you look at it, it's a wonderful formula. And it is, and don't try to do step number 1 first and then, step number 8 first and then step number 1. No, follow the sequence. Because it is giving you a wonderful sequence, a formula-based sequence for you. When by the time you get to your point of dharana and dhyana, you have practiced and you got into a state where you are yamas, niyamas, and pratyahara, all those things. You're in a good command there. Do you know why that is needed? Because your inner samskaras are getting refined, purer and purer and purer, and getting better and better and better. They are becoming sattvika. From rajoguna, tamoguna, they are becoming sattvika. And in that state of mind, when you are doing the dharana, the deep concentration and the dhyana, experiencing a sense of oneness, you will have such a beautiful way of being conscious. You will know that you are the witnessing awareness. You are the consciousness. You will know all is consciousness. Consciousness is all. But if the inner samskaras, your honest way of living, your ahimsa tattvas are not going away, and you want to do dharana and dhyana, what do you think will happen? That the reptile brain, that the residual elements inside you, which you have never paid attention to clean them, they are going to come. In the deep concentration, you're going to feel tremendous. That's why in our meditation sessions, I see people when they complain of tremendous headache in the first 10-15 minutes itself. So I ask them to do some nishkama karma yoga. I send them to homeless shelters. So every week at our home, we make 400-500 meals to all the homeless people. We give them blankets. We give in the winter time, in the summer, we give them clothes. We got a good team here. I got almost 200 children through their hands as a part of character building into them and respecting humanity. We distribute this through their hands. So it's parents, we work together hand in hand to make this happen. It's not one person. So it's a lot of parents, we do it together. Why we do it is when you do this nishkama karma yoga, the selfless, not selfish, selfless, unconditional seva. our dirt, the inner dirt, the pollution in the heart. The love and compassion, it grows. When the love and compassion grows, you will feel a sense of the divinity within comes forth. And in that sense of why do you think our rishis created the formula karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga? Each one of them is meant for a certain purpose. Without your act, your devotional activity, all your intelligence is going to be used for the wrong things. Until you have the service-oriented mindset, all the greatest intelligence you have is only going to bring you negativity. That's what we see in all the artists. They're very intelligent artists, but they never got the chance to refine their inner samskaras. That's why yoga is tremendous for them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And one more question. What is meant by effortless meditation? How it will become regular and easy?
See, no meditation is effortless in the beginning. Just like a musician, for them to become a musician, they have to start either it's vocal or instrumental. We all know how hard it is. But after a certain period of practice, they come to a point where they are able to create their own tunes. They create their own ragas. They create their own songs. Same thing with meditation. In the beginning, you need to understand what is meditation, because meditation is not it's not a one thing. To attain moksha, there is a certain type of meditation where, to raise in your kundalini, there is a certain type of meditation. There is anapana, there is just breath kind of meditation. To cleanse your inner emotions, there is a certain type of meditation. Meditation itself there are many, it has its own purpose, many purposes and many techniques. So first and foremost, I ask you this. What is your goal when you are meditating? What is your goal? The most powerful of all is the Vedantic meditation, where you're merging yourself in the Brahman. You're merging yourself in the cosmos as one among it. Ahamasmi, Aham Brahmasmi, where the individuality dissolves. To reach there, you need all of this. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So there is effort there. See, one of the simplest things I ask you to do, starting from tomorrow itself, go on a walk, simple go on a walk. In your mind, just drop the destiny. Oh, I'm going to start from, I'm going to end there, and I'm going to reach there at this point. By this time, drop your watch, drop the destiny, the destination in your head. Just simply walk. Just simply walk. And as you're walking, learn to be conscious of how the leg, one step is raising, the other step is falling, and the other. Watch your movement of your feet. Watch your hands, how they are moving. And just simply drop. Just simply drop your thought on your limbs. As you are simply walking, just let the walking happen. Just simply let the walking happen. Don't put any effort in it. Just walk. Don't worry about the time. Don't worry about how much energy you're putting in your legs, how much energy you're putting in your hands. Just walk. Effortless, absolute effortless. Do you know the greatest of the realizations you are going to really realize? Oh my God, this body is a robot. I'm a biological robot. Because the legs are doing its job. The hands are doing its job. The brain is doing its job. My heart is doing its job. My blood is doing its job. My inner organs, they are doing its job. Then who am I? What am I? Sarvam idam aham. Who am I? What am I? My dear friend, if you could understand what I just told you, and if you could realize that, your life is complete. Your life is complete. Right here, right now, your life is complete. That is a simple example I can give you of an effortless meditation. But to realize that, the madhura, the rasa part of that enjoyment, the joyfulness that you will feel, that simple example I just told you, it needs some jnana, needs yoga. Either catch hold of Yoga Sutra, Patanjali, try to contemplate on those writings more and more. And just keep doing what I just asked you to do. It's a simple thing. There are many different techniques I can guide you, but I just told you a simple thing. Your simple walking or a simple cooking. Any ammas, there you are cooking. Just do the cooking and drop all the effort. Don't worry, your hands will continue to move. Hands will continue to move, you will still do the right thing, but drop the effort. Breathe easy, calm, take a pause. Take a nice deep breath, pause, and let it go. You'll be amazed what you will know about your own self, that you are never the doer of anything. Na karta na bhokta. Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. You are never the doer nor the enjoyer of anything. You are a biological robot. That just like the toy, when the key is turned on, it will do its blah 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 blah, blah whatever, those tamasha. Your samskaras, inner samskaras, and their prana is turning you on, and you, because you don't know who you really are, you're doing that. You're the puppet playing to the tunes of that puppeter. That's all. Once you know that, meditation is the most effortless thing. You're the walking meditator. As I'm speaking right now, I'm meditating. The actions happen. The actor doesn't exist. Actionless actions. Actions just happen. The actor doesn't exist. Okay, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. It seems there is no more questions. So thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful session. And really, you have given very real time and very wonderful examples to us for each and every concepts. And we all know that yoga is all about harmonizing the body with the mind and breath through means of various pranayamas, asanas, and meditation. So today we have seen very nice concepts like belief structure, which creates the boundaries and conditioning of the mind. But yoga is the art which helps to release the blockages and breaking our boundaries. And we have seen about a lot of arts like respecting. So yes, Sir has given, he has noted each and every points and observed, and he has taken very real-time examples. And he has given the explanation of what of detachment and how to move the mind to ekagraha or nirodha state, and what is viveka, vairagya, and how to overcome the fear. And he has given so many motivational thoughts also along with this session. So really, it's a very inspiration to us, sir. And from the chat session, we can see so many people are inspired by your thoughts, especially. And Really, thank you, sir. I think this is very early morning to you. So thank you for your valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you to all the respected faculty members at Maher. I consider it as a wonderful blessing, especially on a Friday morning here in US. I consider it as a yajna. In the Brahma Muhurta, doing a yajna is considered very, very sacred. So for me, you all gave me that opportunity to perform that yajna. And what more, till the last breath, if you can live like this, tell me why, this is the most beautiful, amazing way to live, isn't it? So I consider this as a privilege, a joyful blessing from Ishvara in the form of you all for giving me this opportunity. I'd love to be in touch. I'll post my phone number in there. You can always be in touch. Some of you are asking the phone number and email. I just posted it for everybody. My phone number and email. So be in touch. I would always love to be in communion with the good friends like you. God bless you all. May the whole Samasta world be peace. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your blessing.
Thank you.
Participants, we are at the end of the day 4 session on faculty development program on integrating yoga in higher education. On the occasion of International Day of Yoga 2022, organized by Meenakshi Academy of Higher Education and Research, Chennai. Before moving onwards, I request all the participants to switch on the camera. With all your beautiful faces, once again, I extend my sincere gratitude towards you all for keeping this Friday session in synergy. Now, feedback link is posted in the chat box. You can feel and send it. Now, let us join the prayer and may the whole world be with that peace, prosperity, and happiness. With that, we will continue our prayer. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. We will meet on day 5 and the last day of our FDP program tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the morning. Thank you all.